Many of us are told growing up that artists don't make money or that being an artist isn't a real job.
My family would freak.
But that's actually not true. Look, I was totally broke when I started my art business. I started with no talent, no money, but I ended up growing an art business so successful that I needed to hire help just to keep up with the demand. So in this video, I'm going to share what I would do differently if I started making money from my art today to help you explode your art sales. And we're going to do it using my Creative Brew framework. And the best part is you don't need to win the lottery or have a trust fund to be able to do this stuff.
Look, if you're too scared, then well, have fun making shoes.
To start, I'm going to show you how to avoid going into a dead-end career. I graduated into a recession and I could barely get a job as a waitress. The only people I knew doing creative work and getting paid for it were graphic and web designers. So I spent several years learning HTML and CSS code so that I could design websites, only to realize that I hated it. When I finally landed a job at an ad agency, they would mostly purchase art and I would only get to arrange that art on the screen. But I wanted to create my own art. You can make money doing a lot of things, but you're here because you want to do something that you actually love doing, right? So how do you avoid wasting years building your skills only to hate the work that you do? Well, that leads us to the B in the Creative Brew framework, blueprint. In reality, there is a bunch of different ways that artists build a career and make money from their art. And what feels exciting to somebody else might be completely boring to you. So there's two parts to creating our blueprint. The first is defining your dream life. And now for this first step, don't worry about what's realistic, what you can or can't do, or what people expect of you. I want you to imagine that you've won the lottery. In this daydream, you are wildly successful. Every project you attempt is a total success. So what are you doing? Specifically, it can be really helpful to imagine a few key things here. 1, where are you doing this work? Are you on a remote tropical beach while you're traveling the world? Are you alone in your own private studio that's perfectly set up with all of the art supplies you could wish? Or are you in a bustling warehouse in a big city surrounded by other artists? 2, who are you working with? Are you alone, cozy in your space? Or do you wish that you were in an office full of creative people working on a team to make big, cool projects? What kind of work are you doing? Are you working on big campaigns for well-known companies that you can brag to your friends about? Or are you drawing cute little animals that go perfectly in a nursery? When are you working? Are you working late into the night for long stretches to get that creative work done? Or do you work all morning and then you have the afternoon with your kids? Remember, this is about what makes you happy. Don't try and be something that you're not. Don't worry about impressing people. Just list out the things that excite you. Now, the second step in our blueprint is to research the different ways that artists make money. Now, when I started on my artistic journey, I had no idea that some of these markets even existed. And this is by no means a comprehensive list. It's really just to help you get started. If you'd like me to do a larger list of the ways that artists can make money, go ahead and let me know in the comments. The world of art is ever evolving and new ways of making art as a living are growing and changing every single day. But let's look at some of these specific examples. So you could do packaging. So my friend Kendall Hillegas, and fellow YouTuber, does food packaging. Editorial illustration is art that's created for places like magazines or newspapers where art is used to help accompany the story. The textile and home decor industry is art that's being used in things like bedding or curtains, wall art, that sort of thing. Stationery and greeting cards. You could also use this kind of art on calendars and planners too. There's a lot of art there. Fashion and apparel. There is so much art that is used for clothing. In fact, that's where a big chunk of my background is. And then there's the video game industry, TV, animation, advertising. I mean, the Super Bowl is half about the commercials, right? And they use a lot of really wild art. Books and publishing, like children's books and all kinds of adult books, also use illustrations too. Now, in most all of these examples, you would be partnering with a company who makes those products and you'd be working with them to create the art. However, if you prefer being your own boss or having more control over how, what, and when you're making something, you can make your own products. Now, when you're making your own products that you're putting your art onto, some people make stickers or greeting cards or tote bags. You could also be teaching art. You can teach art at a school or at an art museum. I got started teaching kids summer camps. I also worked at paint and drink studios. But you could also create online workshops or classes. Similarly, you could make art as entertainment by being a content creator. Examples of this would be YouTubers like Chloe Art Rose or Jazza, who does vlogs and fun art challenges. And then another way you could make a living as an artist is some artists make money by selling products for other creatives to use. So this could be by creating fonts or Procreate brushes or graphic design templates or things like stock illustrations. I want to give you a warning. This is not a buffet. We're not going to go for a little bit of everything. It's much smarter to start with one market at a time. As you are thinking about these different markets, it can be helpful to consider how the art making process for each of these markets works. For example, editorial illustration has a really fast turnaround because news cycles are fast. If you thrive under high pressure deadlines, then this might be a great market for you. But if one day turnaround makes you feel queasy, then maybe editorial is a no-no for you. Now, if you're thinking about working with customers, do you thrive talking to people in person? Maybe going to craft markets are going to be a great fit for you, or do you hate that idea? Then maybe you should be focusing on building an online store instead. All right, once you've chosen a market that aligns with your dream life, next, let's talk about what makes the difference between art that makes you money versus never sells. This step of the framework actually took my student Nevis of Nevo Draws from doing her very first craft market over Christmas to having her greeting cards stocked in a store for Valentine's Day. So how do you do that for yourself? With the R in our creative brew, render. Once you've decided that you want to try your hand at selling stationery, it can seem like the simple next step is to just grab some of that beautiful art that you've made and slap it onto a greeting card. Boom, done. Let the big bucks roll in, right? Well, you might be setting yourself up for disappointment. See, it is absolutely critical that we are considering the nuances of why someone buys a greeting card. But how do you do that? Well, the best way to do this is by actually doing some research into what is already selling. So when I wanted to get into children's apparel, I went to kids' clothing stores and I looked at what the common themes that kept popping up over and over again. I noticed that there were very clear certain color palettes that got used over and over again, as well as the same themes like dinosaurs, unicorns, tractors, flowers. So I made pieces for my portfolio that fit into that. Now, of course, I wasn't just copying that. I was adding my own personal touch in there. But when we look at what's already working, what's already selling, you can learn a lot of lessons. Now, here's a pro tip. It really helps to do as much of this research off of the internet as you can. You may be able to research children's book illustration online, but there's nothing like going into the bookstore and seeing how they arrange and display the books and what makes one book pop out more than others, even if it's sitting on the shelf. There's some things that become so much more obvious in person than they are online. But what if you don't know that much about the market you're trying to break into? That's okay. We're not aiming for perfect here. We are aiming for a first attempt. You don't want to get stuck in this research phase. You don't need to know everything about your market in order to create art for it. It's much more important that you are spending time making great art and sharing it with the right people. You're always going to be learning more about what does work well and what doesn't. That's why this step is called render, because you need to make the work for the specific market. If you want to work with clients, I want you to create a portfolio of 3 pieces that you think would work perfectly for that specific client. And if you want to try your hand at a craft show, I want you to make 3 to 5 designs that you'll print as greeting cards and try sharing a booth or a table with a friend. That's what Nevis did. And after seeing how well greeting cards did at her first market, she realized that Valentine's Day is the perfect occasion for someone to actually buy a card. So she designed cards that would work well for the holiday and got them stocked in a store. So start before you're ready. It's important to be just a little bit outside of your comfort zone because that's the only way to do something the first time. The only way to feel comfortable doing something is having experience doing it. But what if you do it wrong? What if you make a mistake? What if you put yourself out there and it doesn't work? Well, that's where the next step in the Creative Brew comes in. The times when I've made the biggest leaps and the fastest growth in my career has happened when I've done this next step. Because the reality is, you are going to make mistakes. You are going to try things that don't work. And I haven't met a single artist who hasn't had to deal with failure. It's part of building any kind of career or new skill. But you know those people who they always seem like they're winning at life, like everything they do somehow works? It's not that they don't experience setbacks or mistakes or failure. They've just found the secret to taking advantage of those mistakes that helps them get ahead. And we're going to do the same thing using the E in Brew to evaluate two very important areas. First, I want you to ask yourself, what went well about your attempt? And what are the things that you would do again? My most productive Inktober was when I went to the library to draw in the afternoons. When I did my retrospective, when I did my evaluation, I realized that getting outside of my house made me a lot more productive. It may seem simple, but this recognition of what went well and what you would do again is so important because it creates a sense of a win in your brain. And those wins are critical for keeping you motivated. The second step after you've tried to put yourself out there is to write down what didn't go well. Now, if we just left it at that, you're going to be feeling really crappy. So the next important question to ask is, what would you do differently next time? It can feel really scary or disappointing to look back at your failures or what didn't go well. But once I started doing this process, I found it really empowering because instead of just remembering how I had fallen flat on my face, instead thinking of what I could do differently was far more empowering. And doing this evaluation after multiple projects, it helped me recognize the struggles that I was coming up against again and again and again. So let's say that you do a craft market and people seemed really shy and they didn't want to ask any questions. Next time, you could make a price sheet on display so that people don't have to ask you. Look, if companies like Pixar and Google do these post-project evaluations, you know there's got to be something there. And honestly, sometimes the solutions are really simple, but they make a huge difference. There's two ways that you can look at a failure: as a waste of your time or a chance to learn. The reality is that you can't control anything, but by focusing on what you can do, you can get a lot further. Finally, we come to the W in the Creative Brew, which is to work the process again with your new insights. Learning from experience is the best way to grow, and not getting it right the first time or making mistakes is a natural part of the process. But obviously, if you can avoid some of these mistakes, that would be great, right? Well, you can learn from someone else's mistakes instead of having to make them yourself. So check out this video to avoid the 3 biggest wasting time mistakes I made at the beginning of my art career.